Taurus, a lot of money, a funeral, and a wedding in 2025. You're not ready for what's coming. Taurus, have you ever had a season in your life when everything changed, but so quietly it almost didn't make a sound? A season when things were ending and beginning at the same time? When love arrived, just as something you cherished slipped away. If you've been feeling like something big is shifting beneath the surface, without knowing exactly what, it's not your imagination. This is not a time of chaos. It's a time of transition, and you, Taurus, are standing right at the edge of it. Welcome to Zodiac Wisdom. I'm Sophia, astrologer, psychologist, and your quiet companion in this sacred space where stars speak softly and hearts learn how to listen. If you're new here, I'm so glad you found your way. If you've been with me for a while, welcome home. In today's message, we're going to talk about 3 powerful themes that may enter your life in unexpected ways: abundance, loss, and love. Not all at once, but all for a reason. This isn't just about astrology. It's about your emotional rebirth, Taurus. Because in 2025, the universe is asking you to receive more, but only after you're willing to release what's grown too heavy to carry. Stay with me until the end, because what's unfolding for you this year could redefine not just what you value, but who you are. And if this message finds a quiet echo in your chest, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. This journey is for you, and we're walking it together. Gate 1: the price of stability. What you must release to truly receive. Taurus, you've always held stability like a sacred vow. You don't chase. You build. Slowly, quietly, with 2 feet on the ground and your hands deep in the soil of what's real. You take your time because you know what lasts is rarely rushed. But here's the truth no one tells you about stability. Sometimes it turns into a prison. You may not notice it at first. It starts with something small, like staying in a job that no longer feeds you simply because it's familiar. Or keeping a home arranged the same way for 10 years, not because you love it, but because it gives you control. Or maybe it's a relationship that used to bring warmth, but now only offers routine and silence. You hold on not out of fear, but out of loyalty. You think, this has been good to me. I can't just walk away. And yet, something inside you begins to ache. Let me tell you a story about someone like you. Her name is Colleen, a Taurus woman in her early 60s. She'd worked at the same clinic as a scheduler for almost 35 years. A quiet woman, known for her reliability, her kindness, and the way she remembered every coworker's birthday without fail. But Colleen had a dream. Nothing extravagant. Just a small flower shop, something gentle. A place filled with light and lavender and slow mornings. She'd talk about it quietly over lunch breaks. Just an idea. A maybe someday. But she never took the leap. Why? Because she had stability. She had a pension coming. She had her routine. And deep down she had guilt. How could I leave a place that's been good to me? Then one day the clinic merged with a larger corporation. Her schedule was cut. Her workload doubled. The warmth was gone. And still she stayed. Not because she believed in it anymore, but because the thought of starting over felt reckless. Childish. Too late. But Taurus, here's the lesson. When the universe wants you to receive more, it first shows you where you've settled for less. Colleen began waking up anxious. Something she'd never experienced before. Her body, the very temple she'd spent a life caring for, started to speak in whispers. Insomnia, headaches, tightness in her chest. She didn't understand. Nothing bad had happened, but everything had gone numb. That's when she came to me. And I asked her the one question Taurus souls often avoid. Are you truly safe, Colleen? Or are you just used to feeling stuck? She cried. Because the answer hurt. Taurus, there is a price you pay for clinging too tightly to the known. You start to lose access to your own becoming. You trade possibility for predictability. You protect a structure long after it stopped protecting you. And often abundance, the real kind, can't find its way in until you're willing to release something you've outgrown. This year, the universe may ask you to loosen your grip. Not because it wants to take something from you, but because it wants to give you something greater. For some of you, this may show up as unexpected money, an inheritance, a severance, a bonus, or a generous gift. But don't be surprised if it comes with a twist. Sometimes abundance is paired with grief. Sometimes it follows a goodbye. A move, a death, a final closure. And in that moment, you'll be tempted to hold on tighter. You'll ask, why now? Why like this? But Taurus, the blessing isn't the money. It's the permission to realign, to create a new life with it, to invest in yourself in a way you never dared before, to take that risk, not because you're reckless, but because you're ready. Abundance is not just about wealth. It's about energy, flow, renewal. And when you let go of what no longer honors you, money flows differently. Not like a river you must chase, but like a tide that comes to meet you. I asked Colleen, what would happen if you stopped waiting for permission? And in that moment, something softened in her. She didn't quit her job overnight. That's not how Taurus works. But she started saving. She rented a small space on the weekend. She let herself play with bouquets. 1 year later, she opened her flower shop quietly. And her body, it healed. Not because her circumstances changed instantly, but because she finally chose herself. Taurus, what would your life look like if you stopped clinging to comfort and started listening to what's calling you? What door would you open if you stop guarding the one that keeps you locked inside? You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to leap without thinking. But you do need to trust that you are capable of building something new, even now. Especially now. In 2025, the universe will test what you're willing to release in order to receive what you've prayed for. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the gentle voice of change saying, it's not too late, but it is time. In the next gate, we'll talk about loss, not just physical death, but the kind of quiet endings that go unspoken. The friendships that fade. The identities you outgrow. The chapters you don't realize are over until you've already turned the page. And how each of them is preparing you for a kind of love that begins with yourself. Gate 2, the funeral that lives inside you. Honoring the endings you never spoke of. Taurus, you carry your grief like a sacred thing. Not loud, not messy, just quietly folded inside you, like a letter you never sent. You don't talk about endings easily. You prefer continuity, tradition, the known. Even when a chapter closes, you often keep the door unlocked, just in case someone wants to come back. You're not weak. You're devoted. But there's a cost to carrying grief in silence. It begins to harden in the body, to echo in your dreams, to whisper in your relationships. Sometimes what we need most isn't closure from others. It's permission from ourselves to admit, this is over. And it hurt. I want to tell you about Elena, a Taurus woman I once worked with. She was the kind of woman everyone relied on. A pillar. She'd lost her mother 5 years earlier, but never cried in public. She was the executor of the will, the one who organized the funeral, cleaned the house, held everyone else together. She told me, crying won't bring her back. I needed to be strong. But years later, something strange happened. Her emotions began to surface in unexpected ways. She became short-tempered with her husband, avoided her friends, felt a sadness she couldn't explain. One that lingered in her chest like rain that wouldn't fall. And when she finally sat with me and spoke of her mother, her voice trembled. I never said goodbye, not really. That's when I knew. Elena wasn't stuck because of the death itself. She was stuck because she never allowed herself to mourn. Taurus, has this happened to you? Have you ever said, I'm fine, when what you really meant was, I'm afraid that if I let go, I'll fall apart? Have you ever stayed strong for others so long, you forgot how to be soft with yourself? This year, something may ask you to grieve again. Not just the passing of a loved one, but the death of a role, a relationship, a version of you that no longer fits. Maybe it's the friend who slowly stopped calling. Maybe it's the job that once lit you up, but now only drains you. Maybe it's the version of you that always says yes, even when your soul is screaming no. These are funerals too, the quiet kind, and they deserve your presence, your breath, your full goodbye. You don't need to have a breakdown. You don't need to be dramatic, but you do need to feel. Because when Taurus represses grief, it doesn't disappear. It becomes exhaustion, tension, a longing you can't name. You may find yourself visiting old places for no reason, listening to songs from a time you can't return to, holding on to clothes you haven't worn in years, just in case. These are rituals, sacred, unconscious rituals. Your soul trying to say, I remember, I miss it too, but we need to let go. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean dishonoring. It means making space for what's next. Elena eventually wrote a letter to her mother, not to send, but to say what was left unsaid. She lit a candle, read it aloud, and cried for the first time in 5 years. Not out of despair, but out of relief. She wasn't weak. She was finally whole. Taurus, you may need your own ritual. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's a drive to a place that meant something. Maybe it's telling someone, I never really healed from that. Whatever it is, don't run from it. Run to it. Because every ending you refuse to honor becomes a weight you carry into the next chapter. And your next chapter? It's begging for space. You may feel guilt. That's normal. Taurus is loyal to a fault sometimes. You think, if I let this go, does it mean it didn't matter? No. It means it mattered enough to mourn fully. And now it matters enough to lay to rest. Here's what I want you to remember. Grief is not a weakness. It is proof that you loved deeply, that something once had roots in your heart, that you gave your presence fully. And now it's time to give that presence back to yourself, because something new is coming. And before it arrives, your soul must empty out the old. In the final gate, we'll talk about the kind of love that meets you on the other side of grief. Not always romantic, but soulful. A connection so true it can only arrive when you've made space for it. We'll talk about what Taurus love looks like when it's no longer tangled in duty, or guilt, or obligation, but grounded in mutual reverence and calm joy. You're almost there, Taurus. Take a breath. You've done beautifully. Gate 3, the love you thought you missed. When soul connections arrive quietly, Taurus, you don't fall in love quickly. You don't chase butterflies or run into flames. You wait. You observe. You water the soil. And when you love, you root. But somewhere along the line, you may have wondered if you missed your chance. Maybe it was the one that got away. The partner who didn't choose you. Or the one you chose who never really saw you. Maybe you poured yourself into a love that took everything and left you with silence. And now maybe part of you wonders if deep soul-connected love is still possible, or just something reserved for other people. But here's the quiet truth, Taurus. The love you thought you missed wasn't the love. It was a lesson. And the real thing? Still on its way. Or maybe, it's already nearby waiting for you to open the right door. You see, true love for Taurus doesn't crash in like a storm. It arrives like morning light through curtains, gentle, sure, and slow. It doesn't demand. It recognizes. Let me tell you about Malin, a Taurus in her late 40s. She had been divorced for over a decade. After a marriage that looked perfect on paper but felt like walking on eggshells every day. After the divorce, she spent years rebuilding. Focused on work, her children, her garden. She wasn't bitter, just realistic. She'd convinced herself that her window for love had closed, and that was okay. She was at peace. But then something strange happened. Not a dating app. Not a grand romantic gesture. Just a neighbor. A quiet man who waved at her every morning. Who noticed when her front porch light was out and replaced the bulb. Who brought her chamomile when he saw her coughing on a walk. Who didn't flirt. Didn't chase. Just showed up. Again. And again. And again. At first Malin brushed it off. Told herself, he's just being kind. But slowly something inside her softened. Not because she was swept away, but because she finally felt safe. One evening they had tea together. She told him, I don't think I know how to date anymore. He smiled gently and said, Good. I'm not looking to date. I'm looking to know you. Taurus, this is what soul love feels like. It doesn't start with sparks. It starts with trust. It doesn't fill a void. It meets you where you've already become whole. And it only finds you when you've stopped performing and started living as yourself again. Here's the truth you don't hear often enough. The best love comes after grief. After disappointment. After you've rebuilt your life, not for someone else but for you. Because that's when you stop attracting from your wounds and start magnetizing from your worth. Soul connections don't need fixing. They don't need explaining. They just fit. And they won't arrive until you've cleared out the emotional noise that once made you settle. You see, Taurus, the universe doesn't deny you love. It just waits until you're ready to receive the version that won't ask you to shrink, compromise, or translate your soul. But, and this is important, love isn't always romantic. Sometimes the soul connection comes in the form of a friend who sees you, a pet who teaches you how to stay, A passion that fills you more than any partner ever did. Or even a deep reconnection with yourself. You've spent years tending to others. Now the soil of your own heart is ready. And whether that love arrives with a ring or a letter or a quiet Thursday morning with tea, it will not feel like fireworks. It will feel like home. But you must recognize it. You must let go of the fantasy of what love was supposed to look like. You must stop comparing this new feeling to old flames that burned you. And most of all, you must be brave enough to say, "This is enough. And I am enough." The love you thought you missed was not your final chapter. It was the prelude. And now your heart knows the difference. You no longer crave intensity. You crave sincerity. You no longer fear being alone. You value your own company. And because of that, what comes next will not test your worth. It will honor it. Malin and her neighbor? They're not writing poetry on rooftops. They're folding laundry together, cooking quietly, laughing softly. And that, for her, is the grandest romance of all. Taurus, you deserve a love that doesn't confuse you. A love that feels like peace. A love that waits for you to say yes from your center, not from your fear of being alone. And if that love hasn't arrived yet, don't rush. Don't reach. It's already finding its way to you. Your only job is to stay open. In the final part of our journey, we'll bring everything together. Abundance, grief, and love. And talk about what it means for you to walk forward with your whole self intact. We'll close this sacred circle with softness, clarity, and a reminder that you, Taurus, are never too late, never too much, and never forgotten by the universe that shaped you. Stay with me, beautiful soul. The final return is just ahead. Conclusion: you are the constant in the change. Taurus, return to peace and power. Taurus, you've walked through 4 sacred gates. You've seen how the promise of abundance sometimes arrives dressed in disruption, asking you to release the stability you once clung to, in order to receive something deeper. You've faced the kind of grief that has no ceremony, the kind that lingers in your chest for years, because you never quite said goodbye. You've remembered what real love feels like, not loud, not possessive, not grand, but present, gentle, steady, like you. And through it all, you've learned the most important truth of all. You were never broken, just buried, under obligation, under expectation, under years of silence you thought were strength. But now you rise, not with fire, not with fury, but with a quiet resolve that says, "I know who I am, I know what I'm worth, and I will no longer negotiate with anything that asks me to forget." Taurus, you are the constant in the change. You are not here to keep up with the world. You are here to ground it. You bring others home simply by coming home to yourself. And when you do, when you choose yourself without apology, the universe rearranges around that choice. So I ask you, softly but clearly, what are you ready to stop caring? And what kind of life are you finally ready to receive? It's not too late. You're not behind. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. And if you felt this message in your bones, don't let it pass quietly. Like this video, subscribe to our Zodiac Wisdom Circle, and share your voice in the comments below. What are you laying to rest? And what are you calling in? We are listening. We are with you. And Taurus, your next season? It's already blooming.